to Writing the Wrong Way, where we talk about how writing works, how writers work, and why the best writers risk being strange. And I've got with me today a writer, I guess an editor and a publisher as well, MC Joudrey, better known around these parts as Matt Bay Press, which we like to call him as he runs at Bay Press. And Matt, but your new book as a writer is not with Ad Bay Press, but with Guernica Editions. Can you talk a little bit just about, uh, you know, first off, if people listening, if you don't know, Guernica Editions is a very big deal in the literary world. It's a very storied, press with a very interesting history. And in any case, Matt, I just wonder if you could just say something about, how you feel to have a Guernica Editions book coming out, or out now, I suppose, when people are hearing this.
Yes. Well, I'm very pleased about it because, as you mentioned, Guernica Editions is they've been around for a very long time in an industry that has zero room for forgiveness and almost no margin for error. And they've got a great team, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with them. It was as a publisher of an independent Canadian press. I know all too well the inner workings of how a press survives and hopefully thrives. And it was really lovely to work with another great Canadian publishing house.
And can you talk a bit about just the experience, or not just the decision making process that kind of would goes into, taking a book to a publisher like Guernica, when
Mhm.
you, of course, could publish it yourself, as you have done in the past.
Right.
What sort of makes the difference for you in whether you do a thing yourself or go somewhere else with a book, or what kind of goes into that process? Because you're sort of in a somewhat unique position in
Yeah,
that
that's right.
respect.
Yeah. Well, I think the big difference is of course, all the moving parts are now somebody else's responsibility. I'm only responsible for the book. So, get the book done, get the book submitted. If it's accepted, then, work with that publisher on the substantive edits, copy edits, proof edits, and really then after that, it's, they're taking control again and, they're printing it and distributing it. And my job is, of course, to show up at events. Um, so I think the big difference there is that a lot of the moving parts are on the other publisher. Um, the other big difference, of course, is that, if I would have published it through at Bay Press, I own the rights, and I also own all of the risk and all of the spoils. Um, the flip side is, of course, the risk is with Guernica, and they're the one putting all the financial risk into the book. And then I am taking, my royalty payment as my only form of financial gain. So I think there's a big difference there, in that respect. I think as far as the way At Bay Press operates and the way Guernica operates, it's pretty much the same. I mean, they have a Canadian distributor. We have a Canadian distributor. The job of the distributor is to get the books into the bookstores, and the job of the bookstores is to sell those books to readers. So it's the same in that regard. But I think those are the big major differences. I personally thoroughly enjoyed being able to see how another independent publishing house operates and how they do things. And I can honestly say it's pretty close to the same. I mean, there's few little differences, of course, things that they do that we don't do, and of course they have a completely different staff than we do, and um, but yeah, no, it was great. It was fantastic.
I've seen over the number of years I've been a professional writer, I guess, an editor, and so on. I've seen these waves. come in publishing, and there was sort of a wave of self-publishing that came in. There was a wave of, they started calling it indie publishing instead, but it was effectively just a different type of self-publishing. And then there was a wave where people were getting away from self-publishing, and a wave of like, what you might call it, hybrid publishing. People sort of where they'd indie publish, but their goal was really to get a larger publishing deal. And they were sort of, either successful at that or had shot themselves in the foot related to that goal. You know,
We've certainly seen that, Jonathan.
we've seen both,
We've
but
definitely had that fair share of people
right.
reach out to us and send us those.
But I feel like I've always said when people ask me, which I do all the time, should I, seek a large press, a small press? Should I start my own, indie publishing project? I find it's an interesting question because now you have opportunities in a way that didn't exist when you and I were young. But at the same time, you have the problems of the opportunities, as well. Many people who start publishing don't realize, who start self-publishing, I should say, don't realize it is a publishing project. And whereas you're in a situation where you're running like a real publishing company, and let's call it, for lack of a better word, where
Right.
you're
Yeah.
you're mostly publishing other people. You might publish yourself here and there, but it's very minimal, relatively speaking. Primarily you're just publishing other people, as a press would, with an infrastructure, distribution to bookstores, and so on and so forth, right? But like that's a lot of infrastructure, and what I've found over the years is, you can do you can either write things and leave it to someone else to utilize their infrastructure, as or you can start building your infrastructure yourself, or you can try some sort of halfway hodgepodge of the two methods. But at the end of the day, you're doing one thing or the other on a day-to-day basis. And so what I find, the more I build publishing infrastructure, the less time I have to write. The more I write, the less time I have to do other things. And I always think it just behooves, I think, an artist in the modern age to just be diversified, for lack of a better way to put it, to have a lot of eggs in a lot of baskets, and to, not have to do everything yourself, but, uh, make these partnerships. I think we've moved into a weird space in publishing, I would say, and I don't know what you think about this, but where I feel like the idea that a publisher would be a partner to a writer has sort of gone away. And there are some presses who are trying to kind of bring it back, but I would say for the most part, there's an antagonistic idea in the culture, which I don't think is helpful to anyone. And so it's nice to me to see somebody who's, could, just do it alone, but, trying to make those partnerships, trying to, reach
Right.
out, learn from another publisher, see how they do things, as you say, particularly, when they're as, well respected as Guernica, or, some of these other publishers you might find. I really am, happy myself to be working, to have done books, the Coach House and Book Hug, who I really love.
Yep.
But I'm always looking for someone. I've got a book coming out, like Image Comics. Like I'm always looking for some new partner, um, as opposed to just that sort of. I think a lot of people have a more mercenary approach to how they manage their career, or work within the industry. So all this is just to sort of ask, I guess, the general question of, how do you think, uh, the how do you think it is to be a writer and a publisher in the world today? Do you find
Hmm.
it difficult to be both things, or do you feel like, you kind of wish you had siloed into one or the other more fully, or is it, you seem to have a pretty, because one thing I think, Matt, that I know I'm kind of in a weird roundabout way asking this question, but you're one of the few publisher writers that I know who actually writes and didn't just used to write.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
so, without throwing anyone else under the bus, I'm curious to know how you have managed that.
right. Uh, well, I haven't.
Right. But you got a new book
I'm
coming out.
putting out a book. I'm putting out a book now. My last book was 2016, so we're 2026. It's just coming up on 10 years ago. So my primary focus is to the publishing company and to my authors and artists. Um, we love them, and we understand how vulnerable they are. We understand that the arts, especially writing and publishing and bookmaking, is probably at the lowest end of the financial gain spectrum, and that our authors are very exposed, very vulnerable to not being able to make a normal cost of living. Um, that's viable. And so we're always looking for ways to make sure that we can support our authors and our artists because of that very nature. I mean, most of the authors, not all of the authors and artists that we represent, if they lived off of their royalty payments alone, they'd be living below the poverty line. That's just a horrible fact, but it's the truth. And so for us, we are constantly knowledgeable of that specific case, and that we want to do as much as we can for them to support them. And that's just the nature of what we're doing, right? So it's very difficult, is what I'm saying. It's very difficult. We have to do this, and we want this for them. So with that in mind, I think that, my focus is always on the publishing. Writing for me, is something that I'm passionate about because of the fact that I love this industry. I love um, writing. I love publishing. I love working with all of these authors and artists. And so, yeah, it is a unique position, as you put it, but at the same time, um, our focus has to be on the authors that we represent. Yeah.
And can you talk a bit about Marmalade Parades? Just for starters, just the title. I love the mouthfeel of the title, Marmalade
Yeah,
Parade.
right.
And I'm curious to know just a little bit about how you came up with that title. And I assume you also enjoyed the mouthfeel of that. How important is that kind of thing, the sort of poetic
Yeah.
feel, uh,
Yeah.
in a thing like a title for you?
Yeah, I loved coming up with that title. It was really, really, really exciting to sit down and kind of wrestle with the idea of what the title was going to be. But I had that title quite early. I knew that it was going to be unique and strange. And that my hope was is that at some point, if people pay really close attention, they'll be able to understand why I selected the title, because it's certainly in the book. It's just it's not like somebody just comes along and says, "Hey, let's go to that marmalade parade happening on Main Street." Right? So it's there's certainly more than meets the eye on that one for sure.
And can you talk a bit about the structure of the book? Maybe it's sort of how it, you know, how you arrive at this particular structure where you have these, it'd be opening with this memorandum. You've got these lot, you have a sort of a standard narrative. We have these auction lot descriptions and so on and so forth. Can you just talk a little bit about how this book is shaped, and maybe how when did you kind of come up with the idea of having this sort of narrative structure? I always find one of the most uh, biggest moments in a project for me is when I get the sense of the shape of the book in a structural manner. And I'm curious to know, like, for you, is that something you sort of had early on, or was that something that kind of accreted over the course of writing, or how did you what is the structure of the book, and how did you kind of arrive at that structure?
Yeah, I knew it early on. I mean, as you've probably seen in the past from my previous work, my fiction, my writing style tends to be experimental in nature. Um, and I like that. I mean, yes, I read linear narratives and enjoy them quite a bit. But I get really excited about people who take chances, try new things, are willing to, really sort of climb close towards that edge and maybe even look over it a bit and see what's down there. And so that's my hope for the reader experience in this is that they feel that there is some risk taking. They feel there's some danger in the style of prose and structure. Um, and then on top of that, the book is broken down into three parts. The bulk of the narrative and the really sort of like traditional novel um, approach happens in part one and really drives the plot and pace forward as well too. The second part is an auction of material goods owned by the antagonist. And um, the point of that is to offer up to the reader very unique way of connecting with this main character that is totally not in any way traditional. And that's so key to the reader experience is that I want them to feel like they're really, the author has devised a new way for you to l- potentially connect with this character. In that, are we actually ever able to? And it asks a great question, and this is the question: are we ever able to really know somebody based on the material possessions that they owned? And of course, to offer up the impermanence of what a material possession is. And I mean, there is this always sort of running joke that everything that we own, we don't own it. We're just keeping it safe for the next generation. We're just holding on to it before it's handed down. Right? And then what happens when that's handed down? I love this aspect of it because I think that the ego of the owner of these material possessions believes that, when I hand down that silverware set to my daughter, she's going to love it. When in fact, most of the time nowadays, that stuff just gets sold in a garage sale or a yard sale, or to an antique shop. They don't care about it. And who are we to expect our loved ones, friends, colleagues that we might leave this stuff to, you know, own it after we're gone?
I was
And why is that a thing?
I was thinking about that the other day because I had where I was reorganizing stuff in the house and I came across this box of things that had been, more or less left to me, right? So without going into detail about it, because in case my family listens, but like I'm looking at this stuff and I'm thinking like I don't remember this stuff existing when they were alive. Like it's not like I have like it wasn't
Right,
in their house on display or something. Like I never had interaction with it. I didn't even know they had it.
right.
So it's like I don't know what to do with it on that level, like, you know, it doesn't remind me of the person who
Hmm.
I have, fond memories of, but they don't
Right.
related to these things, and so it's just it's very confusing. Yeah, what was going through their mind because it clearly mattered a lot to them that I had this thing, but I don't know why.
Hmm.
And so then, yeah, what do you do with it? It becomes a weird meta issue on a certain level.
It is a meta issue. It is one of those things where you wonder about it. Like, I look at this. I think about there's very little romance involved in the finality of material goods. The idea that somebody's engagement ring is passed down to to a family member who will then offer it up to a new loved one in their life, and that beautiful story, which is a fairy tale story. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen; it does. But I'm just saying that the likelihood is slim. Most people see it as nothing more as financial gain, and they turn it into just that. And which is also fine. It's just my point is that the idea of this auction in the book asks the reader those tough questions to consider, and then also offers up a very unique way to connect with a main character in the book and to hopefully drive forward uh, the narrative and the secrets and the mystery in this book in an extremely unique way. And then, of course, the third part of the book is nothing more than a corporate conversation. And I can't think of any better way to end a mystery than with a very sterile conversation between two corporate lackeys. And the fact that there is zero um, narrative. It is straight back and forth dialogue from beginning to end between two individuals. And this book is unique in that two things that I really, really chased after, which was one, zero dialogue attribution, none whatsoever. Um, and it makes it even more difficult because of the fact that I'm Matt Joudrey, you're Jonathan Paul. We both have names. The characters in this book have no names. So the challenge there was not just on the reader, but it was originally on me to make sure that I wrote in a way that offered the reader everything that they needed to know so that they know who's talking, what's going on, especially when I'm not using dialogue attribution. And then the other thing is that I did not use any adverbs in the book. And that was also by design because I wanted the pace of the book to be quick. As you put it earlier, there were lots of slow burns. Well, there is. And so with those slow burns, I need them to catch fire and move forward. And without, I find that adverbs significantly slow the pace of the book. That's
Sure.
just me, right? And so the removal of those altogether forced two things to happen. One, the pace to quicken, and then two, that I am also using the sparest of text for the reader.
How do you, so a couple of just things out of that. So one thing simply is how do you, I'm a big proponent of not writing dialogue attribution. I've written
This I know, Jonathan.
long
That's why I
posts
brought it
about
up.
it. Yeah. Yeah. And I rail against it routinely, and I've written, at length about it. How, no one should ever use dialogue attribution, except in
Mhm.
one particular experimental instance. But
See, experimental. I love it.
I'm curious to know where you settled on that idea, and if you could talk a little bit more about that minimalism on a certain level, because you have an interesting style where it's both minimalist but also like unnecessarily describing things. So, for example, you open that main narrative section with, it's Jasmine and something else competing for the air as I come into the room. And he's looking at the swimming pool no one swims in. There's a plant falling goofy at the edge of the window. That verb goofy is great, or adjective, I suppose, in this case.
Mhm.
But it's thick with yogurt blossoms. The tender petals caress the panoramic silica. So on one hand, it's a very stripped down, minimalistic
Right,
style. But on the other hand, you're describing a thing that doesn't really need to be described on a technical level. And so therefore it's not minimalism.
right.
And so I'm curious to know where you kind of arrived at that approach for the book, and stylistically, sort of how you settled on this way of telling the story.
Well, like I said, the structure of the book was meant to be experimental. But the like, okay, so an example. You'll notice throughout the book when you're reading this, there are a number of hardware terms that create a new paragraph, but it's not really a new paragraph. It could be a single word. It could be very short sentence. Um, you know, it could be a verb, it could be a noun, it could be anything. The point of that was I felt in that very moment I really needed to quicken the pace. I wanted the page to just jump, fly. I wanted it to leap off the page, and I wanted to carry the reader forward in this breakneck speed. And then immediately I had the control. So I'm at the driver's seat. I'm able to throw it down from fifth gear suddenly into first gear and slow things way down, as you put it, with a very unique moment like that where I'm going to introduce um an experience in the room. And it can be jarring. And it reminds me of something along the lines of, like, say, for instance, Hitchcock doing something so simple as tilting the camera lens just off center so that slowly the room is also tilting and you start to do this. And you don't even notice it until suddenly your neck hurts and you're like, oh my God, why? Right? But you've been slowly, carefully drawn in this way that makes you feel just a little prickly, a little uncomfortable.
It's interesting that you talk of pace in this sort of way because as I write more and more and I get deeper and deeper into fiction in particular, I feel more and more like pace is the most important thing. And it's a strange thing to say, but especially in comics, when I started to move into comics, I I I I f- I was having a hard time, and so what I did was um I had one of your authors actually, Lyndon Radchenka, um, do some lettering for me, and I had him letter
Mhm.
blank panels. Like I had him take the script and letter blank pages, breaking them into panels, showing me how the dialogue would move. He thought I was insane. He still maintains it was a waste of time, but to me, it was like it taught me everything I needed to know about
Mhm.
how pace works in comics, which I didn't understand at all because I'd come from film.
Right.
Film is the opposite of comics in many ways. People think they're similar, but the way they treat time is the opposite. And in the novel, I think so much lives and dies, particularly in certain genres like sci-fi and horror. So much lives and dies by the pace. And you've got these kind of weird genre elements in here as well, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know, like, why did you find pace to be so predominant, in this, because it's not something in your last book wasn't as tightly paced in that respect.
No, not at all. No. But it was a different time too. Um, and I know that sounds a little nuts because it's only 2016 and we're only a decade later. But we are vying for people's attention span more so now than ever. And if you're a writer and you think that you're not, then that's a really big problem. I'm not saying it's a good thing. In fact, it's a terrible thing. The fact that we have to compete with the mechanical nightmare that's happening out there and the onslaught, and it is truly just an onslaught, a barrage of visual trash that is being thrown at us, especially through the most useless of applications like social media. I mean, to me, probably one of the most detrimental creations of all time is Instagram. And I know that people will argue with me on this, and fortunately, they don't have a voice today because they're not on the show.
I wouldn't
So
argue.
tough luck. But But I think that this is just a bold opinion, but I think the impact that Instagram has had on people from a negative health perspective, uh, I think in another 5 to 10 years, we'll be talking about it in the same way that we do now about, for instance, cigarettes. You
Now,
know?
so kind of jumping off that though, uh, so there's a level where perhaps your pace serves then the needs of a person who is
Well, yeah,
attuned to a
I'm
fast
coming back to
pace,
that. Yeah.
but at the same time, you're being very demanding on
Yeah.
a certain level. You know, like they nailed the furniture to the ceiling on the cartoons. He says something else too. I mean, what is this
Yep.
something else he said? You know, there's a demand for attention in a book. I like to call, by the way, Matt, a book's anti-social media. That's my joke
Yes.
about the
It
book.
is anti-social media. It is. And it's and a line like that that you pointed out, he says something else, but we're not told what it is 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 um is is a really important way. It's a trick of forcing the reader back into the game. I lost you maybe for a second, but I've got you back. And like I said, we are constantly vying for the attention. And what you have a tangible object like a book and text, and there are no visuals. You know, we're working a completely different part of our brain, a different part of that muscle, um, which is we have to imagine what the characters sound like. What and I don't give any of that to you. As an author, I give you nothing. I don't say that Jonathan Ball sounds like has a beautiful radio voice and he's got salt and pepper colored hair. There's no laundry list of crap that
Yeah.
I'm going to give you. I want you to develop the sound of the characters. I want I want to work the looks of the character into the story. There's no like, he had blonde hair and blue eyes and his skin was tanned and he always wore blue shirts. Like none of that. Work it into the story. And
I
so this is everything.
I think the thing that so a lot of people will say the sorts of things you were saying prior to this, and then go on to say, therefore, I need to make things easier to understand. Therefore, I need to make things less demanding. This is the Netflix model, right? You know, they're going to be on their phones, so therefore you can't give them anything they have to pay too much attention to. But of course, you're
Yeah.
not taking that tack, right? You're taking the opposite tack.
I'm taking the
Is it
opposite. Yeah.
swimming upstream, Matt, or do you think there's a call for this, a need, a demand, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah.
What's the is it just a
I
contrarian
think it's
position that you and I are taking, or are we
no,
right?
no, I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix. I think there are lost causes. And when I say lost causes, I think there are certain people who are never going to find their way to books. They don't care about critical thinking or abstract thinking. They're very happy to, they're very happy to live in their little couch world, and that's all they want, and that's, I guess, fine for them. Um, I do think that there is a bit of a cultural revolution sort of lurking in the shadows right around the corner, where people are tired of being spoon-fed absolute garbage. I think they're tired of, um, you know, uh, everybody being a celebrity. Of, um, I think they're tired of the invasive, corporate footprint that is in their life. And I think that they do want to scale things back and find uh, a more uh, profound dose of integrity. And when I say integrity, cultural, artistic integrity, and rediscover what that's like. I mean, an example, during the pandemic, uh, we couldn't we couldn't go see people that we loved. But what we were allowed to do was rediscover nature. And so all these people talked about how, I went for a walk in the forest, or I went to rural Manitoba for the first time in
Hmm.
since I was a kid. And I do think that these difficult moments allow for a section of the population at large to rediscover things that really matter and that really do exact lasting change and help them enjoy um, a more rich and fruitful life.
I was talking to somebody the other day who was trying to convince me that I needed to spend more time marketing on social media, like marketing
Mm,
books, the
sure.
publishing company, whatever you want to call it, my books on social media, for lack of a way of putting it. I was saying like, but no, those people don't read, like, you know what I mean?
That's
Like,
right.
it's not, what's the point? They don't want to buy a book.
This is the big question, Jonathan, is what do we do about that?
Yeah, I don't
And
know
my answer,
how do I reach the people who are not on social media is a harder question, but like the people on social media aren't the ones to reach on a certain level.
so I run a business. That business is very much dependent on the author, the artist themselves. I've been asked because I interview every author. So if a manuscript for our publishing house is earmarked in a way that we are considering acquiring it for publication, I personally meet with every author and interview them. And part of that is so that they get a feel of who I am, I get a feel of who they are. And I get asked this all the time. Well, I've got, 20,000 followers on my Instagram channel and yada yada, right? And so that means nothing to me.
No,
Nothing.
nothing. But what could
It's
it mean?
well for them to think that this is
But they've
going to
been
help
told
sell their
this
book.
by other publishers though, right?
Right.
Like this is the
That's
weirdness of
exactly
it.
it. That's
Yeah,
exactly it. But my concern, and I want to drive this home with them, is my concern is the work. The
right.
work. Do you have a great book? And are you going to meet the editorial standards that are going to be put in front of you with our substantive editor, our copy editor, our proof editor, our managing editor, because it's going to go through those four big process. Are you going to be able to do that? Are you going to be able to handle it? Are you going to submit to it in a way where there is this symbiotic relationship? There is this beautiful partnership of making a good book great and more heads in the room to focus on. I mean, what a beautiful thing to focus on your work. More people are focusing on your work. So for me, that's huge. And so Instagram followers, I mean, I have no social media and I'm a publisher. I don't have Facebook, I don't have Instagram, I don't have Twitter, X, or whatever they call it now, and that jackass is doing. Um, so I don't
Yeah,
have
but
any of that.
what would you do with it? I tell people like when they're like, how do I grow my social media followers? I'm like, why? Why don't you
Hmm.
spend, instead of spending your time and therefore your money, like you're gonna go work, you know, and then to take your free time and spend it
Right.
doing this stuff. It's why not just buy Facebook stock? If you think Facebook's such a great place to be, buy Meta stock. You'll make more
Yep.
money than if you had 1,000, 20,000 followers.
That's it.
Not that you should buy Meta stock. I'm just saying like that would be the more lucrative play than trying to build your following on Meta. It doesn't make
That's right.
any sense.
No,
Um,
it doesn't. And I mean, to me, I think that the most important thing is the work, the quality of the work. That's number one. Number two is, are you willing to, show up at the physical places that really matter? Show up at book conventions, show up at bookstores to meet with readers, talk about your book, do readings. Um, Heck, nothing feels better than receiving an autographed copy directly from the author. I mean, that's such a fantastic experience, and be able to chat with them for a second and ask real questions directly face to face. Those are the types of things that I think are going to drive your presence, help your writing craft, and you know, ultimately grow a lasting and viable readership.
Is there a level where the book, which focuses so much on memory and
Right.
themes related to, the way that memory and identity interconnect, and how that is, let's say, mediated by objects and others and so on. Are there ways? Can you talk a bit about why those themes matter so much to you,
Yeah, sure.
and what you hope somebody takes away from the book as we sort of wrap up a little bit?
Okay. Well, I think the big thing is that yes, the foundation of the themes in the book are steeped in memory. And all of its sort of little myriad particles that are attached to it. Nostalgia being one, love, passion, um, pain, suffering, a loss are all themes that are played out through memory. Um, Anger is a big one. Uh, I mean, the frustration that the antagonist suffered from in the book is palpable. And it drives forward the questions the protagonist continues to ask and often doesn't get the answers. And I think that that whole tedious aspect is rings very true to what happens in real life when we have a family member or a loved one that suffers from a mental decline, dementia, Alzheimer's. And we watch this person who we've known our whole life suddenly begin to fade away, erode away. Um, and there's nothing we're so helpless for. They're so helpless because they begin to see these little things too. They're like they get frustrated and angry about how they forgot to close the fridge door again, or that they've done the same thing 3 times in a row. And yeah, I mean, it's terrifying. It's scary. It is a horror story, to some degree in that regard. And there's a mystery involved in it as well, too, which is what is the driving force between these two characters? Why are they together? Let's solve this. So
Makes me think of Paul Auster a lot. That sort of
great
did you
example.
have? Yeah, like what did you have in the background as influences when you were putting this book together?
I wish I was better at that, at calling those out, because I don't think that I think about it
Sure.
at all. I do think though that I'd be remiss not to say that absolutely there are always influences. I just don't know in that moment what they could have been. It's not like I was thinking of Paul Auster's work, the whole time I was working, or that it even came up. But I've read tons of his books and I love his work. And it's entirely possible that he had an effect on what I did there. It's entirely possible that I mean, one of our authors who I love and who I think writes uh, really great you know metafiction is Gary Thomas Morse. And again, uh, could there be an influence there? It's entirely possible. I mean, I read and publish his work, and love it. So, you know, movies, music, um, scenarios that play out in public. These all these things for sure end up coalescing in my mind as I'm working through this. And then I think that you um, pull these free, you know, like pulling beats from the ground. You just kind of
Sure.
just say, "Oh, there's a good one. I'll throw that in the bag." And so
Well,
you do that.
what I like about um, the structure and the style of a novel like this is it is a type of book that people, of course, are still making. Um, but it goes in and out of fashion, uh, in a sense, because novels these days have gotten so um, focused on clear, straightforward narrative. And I find it so
You know
uninteresting.
why that is, though.
I know
You
exactly what it is,
right?
but
Because they're chasing the possibility of a bestseller,
yeah,
right?
or a film
You're looking at a
adaptation.
model.
And I'm not against
No,
some of those books. I just read Red Dragon again, which is, I think, a brilliant book.
right,
But it is, you know, I just feel like so many novels don't play with the novel form. And to me, like, the novel is not a long short story. It's a very precise form.
right.
Bakhtin said that, the difference between a novel and a short story is you can put a short story inside of a novel, but you can't put a novel inside of a short story. The novel is this repository of things. It has an archival sort of element to it, and
Yeah,
you can put different texts inside of it. And just that basic insight to me is so rarely followed up on in modern fiction. And so the idea that you'd have, this type of narrative and a lot, description and so on,
yeah.
like, to me, that's just, I don't know why that isn't the most common way of writing a novel. So the fact that it isn't the most common way of writing a novel makes me appreciate when I start to see those things, well done. They can be poorly done, of course, but when I see that sort of thing well done, it just is just very exciting for me because I feel like, oh, maybe someone's actually going to move the novel forward a
This
little
is it.
bit,
Yep.
as opposed to that treading of water we so often get with the novel in the modern age.
Yeah. Well, I think the big thing, Jonathan, is that with novels that chase formula, right? Where they're I've got tried, tested, and true formula. I'm going to use that. You leave yourself open to scenes and scenarios in the novel, characters that are lacking, that are mediocre. When you take risks and you try very hard to break all molds, um, the chances of you having a complete flop are much higher. But the chances of you achieving um, this scintillating greatness are also much higher. And that's where I see really important fiction happening are those people who are willing to say, you know, yeah, if I write that formulaic book, chances are the big awards are probably going to pay closer attention to it. It's easier to digest. I'm probably going to have a wider readership, and like a good movie, not a great movie, a good movie, it will be enjoyed on a digestible level, an accessible, digestible level. Because when you watch a good movie and there are those two scenes in it where you're just like, oh God, this is a horrible montage scene. But the movie itself was actually pretty good. But you get those two scenes that you're just
Hmm.
like, if they just would have cut that out, it would have been a much better. Well, you're gonna have the same experience with that in a novel as well. You're gonna read that one chapter and go, "Ugh, God." But you know what? I'm in deep enough, and the thing is good enough that I'll just finish it. Whereas with something that is taking risks, trying new things, which is why I am so enthralled by poetry these days, because most of the risk taking that's happening is happening in poetry. It's happening in poetry. People are, and it's also and not shockingly so, that has the smallest readership because people don't know how to they don't know how to access it. They don't know how to digest it. They don't know how to read it. Their brains are have been demolished in a way by the you know um, disease of technology that they don't know how to they don't know how to tense that muscle anymore. They don't know how to work it up. It's weightlifting that's out of their weight class.
Well, if you're listening to this and you want to tense those muscles and build them up, make sure you check out Marmalade Parade. It's out now. As you're listening to this, Matt has just launched it at McNally Robinson in locally, and is of course available elsewhere, everywhere. But that launch is likely archived on McNally's YouTube channel if you want to take a look for it. Matt's been
Yeah,
doing a
will
lot
be.
of other press. He's been on CBC. He's been doing other things. If you want to go check out more interviews with Matt. Joudrey and also Publishers Weekly just published a nice review of the book. So those are some things to check out if you want further reading about Marmalade Parade. But of course, it's best to just go read Marmalade Parade. So thanks so much, Matt, for talking to me. Keep writing
Thanks,
the wrong way.